Hari Om, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. A huge superhero holding down a squirming villain is the way most of our adventure stories end. And a similar picture can be seen with Hanumanji in the Ramayana, where we see him becoming huge with all his strength and courage. He's fighting all these asuras. And in fact, when we're telling the kids the stories, especially the boys, love the bit where Hanumanji is punching out all the bad guys and asuras. And the next verse of the Chalisa is describing the scene. Bhima Rupa Dhari Asura Sahare Ramachandra Ke Kaja Savare. And even though he's destroying these villains, it's being done for Ramchandra Ji. And I think that's the important point, that this fighting is just not for the sake of fighting. It's for the sake of righteousness and bringing about transformation and upliftment in the society. When we talk about injustice and when we see it outside, we get so angry when you hear about child labor in all these farms where they're growing what then becomes our chocolates and coffees. It infuriates us that people can be so cruel. Or even when we see animals being senselessly killed just for the joy of hunting. And with most recently with sharks, because of this trend of movies showing sharks in such a bad light, they actually now to the point of being endangered species. And so when we see this kind of violence or suppression, when we see this kind of injustice, we want to do something about it. But very often we don't. We feel it, but we don't really act and accomplish anything towards it. But Hanumanji did. Bhima Rupa Dhari Asura Samhare means he stood up against negativities. He became big. He didn't let them overcome him and overwhelm him or even threaten or dissuade him. He took a stand and persistently he continuously worked at destroying that negativity. And today we don't see it in the same way as Hanumanji in the war or the superheroes with their squirming villains. Today when we have to take a stand, it's done in very different ways. Recently in Hong Kong, the students all protested, and it was so beautifully peaceful where they just set up tents on the road, of course causing a lot of traffic jam and havoc in the city, but they made their point. All they wanted was to be heard. All they wanted was that justice be served and there be more humane ways with medical conditions and education and the distribution of wealth. And so to get the attention of the government, they were persistent, they were sincere, and they did it in a very, very peaceful way. In other countries where the media is ruled or controlled by the government and that government is corrupt, protesters have taken social media as a way to communicate to the public about the levels of corruption and the money laundering and showing proof and evidence about the injustices that are going on in that country to make people realize that don't stay ignorant, but also don't stay not caring and not doing anything. An attitude of helplessness that we have within us the ability to bring about change. Recently, I read a very interesting story about working towards a cause. 3 ladies had gone into a classroom of young children of about the age of 5 or 7, and they were supposed to be the guest for that day. And so one of the women tells the children, this afternoon, we're going to draw a picture of people doing different jobs. And first of all, we're going to draw pictures of firefighters. And so the kids happily settled down and got out their colors. And as they finished, they excitedly exclaimed, mine is firefighter Greg. And mine is firefighter Simon. And look at mine. He's so strong. Then one of the other ladies said, okay, great. And now we're going to draw pictures of surgeons. And so again, the kids happily scribbling on their papers. And soon enough, they were introducing Dr. Bob. And this one is Dr. Harry, who's a brain surgeon, and he's giving everybody medicine. And finally, the last lady said, and let's draw pictures of fighter pilots. So once again, the children not only drew the pilot, but the planes and the missiles and got all excited about it. And again, they introduced their firefighters. It was John, and it was Darrell, and it was Henry. And then the three women said, well, now we're going to introduce you to a doctor and a firefighter and a pilot. So the kids were all excited to see these guests that were going to come into the classroom. And the three women returned dressed in their uniform. And the first one introduced herself, saying that she was a surgeon. And the second introduced herself, saying she was a fighter pilot. And the third said she was a firefighter. And the kids were unbelievably silent because they were quite taken aback. And proof from all the photographs that they had drawn that gender biases still very, very much live in society today. And the ladies got the kids to wear their caps and to play and pretend to be all these different professions, and then got them to draw the professions once again. And it's interesting that still out of 65 pictures, only 5 were women. Fighting for causes, fighting for things that appear to be unjust isn't always so easy and doesn't happen so quickly. Sometimes it takes consistent work towards that. And even a small thing like this in a classroom is standing up for something that we believe in, working towards making society more equal, more just, having the patience to keep at it is bimarup, is becoming strong. Because so often when we want to fight against these causes, which sure we feel are great, we don't do it consistently because sometimes it's just so inconvenient. I remember when the protest was happening here in Hong Kong, it was terribly inconvenient to have the roads blocked and to find alternative ways of getting to places and to be stuck in traffic for so much longer because the students were sleeping on the roads. And so easier to just get along with everyday life and not have to think about the big picture. Or sometimes when we're the first one to stand up for something, we risk being laughed at or teased or criticized. And sometimes we risk even failure. So with the gender bias thing, the most recent Ghostbusters movie, working with the same theme of eliminating that stereotypical notion of the heroes being male, had 3 women as their Ghostbusters. And there's always a risk. There's always a risk that it doesn't get received well by society, and it could be a financial loss or a loss of reputation. But when we do, when we persistently stay committed to the cause, that's Bhimarupadari Asura Samhare. It's not fighting somebody who's horrible. It's usually fighting the complacency within ourselves and within the people around us. The complacency that lets us leave things which we know are not the best way for them to be. And so Hanumanji becoming big is not him using physical brute force. It's him taking a stand and being so firm in that stand, fighting against injustice in every way, showing us that we have the strength, and if we have the commitment, we too can definitely make a difference, even if in a small way, like the 3 women that went into the kindergarten classroom. If we fight, we might lose. But if we don't, then we've already lost. Think about it.